In the quiet town of Maplewood, Ohio, in the summer of 1985, Emily Carter awoke with a gasp, her heart pounding like a drum in the stillness of her childhood bedroom. The air was heavy with the scent of honeysuckle drifting through the open window, and the faint hum of cicadas filled the early morning. Her hands trembled as she clutched the silver locket around her neck, its intricate engravings warm against her skin. It was no ordinary heirloom. Her late mother had whispered that it held an ancient magic, a gift passed down through generations of Carter women to grant a second chance to those who suffered unjustly, as memories of a past life flooded her mind, vivid, painful, and all too real. Emily realized the impossible had happened. She had been reborn, thrust back to a pivotal moment in her youth, given the opportunity to rewrite a life that had ended in tragedy. In that previous life, Emily had been a girl consumed by love for Ethan Thompson, the younger son of the Thompson family, her parents' closest friends. Orphaned at 12 after a car accident claimed her mother and father, Emily had been taken in by the Thompsons, who treated her like their own daughter. Ethan had been her everything, with his tousled blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and reckless charm. She followed him through Maplewood's dusty fields, shared milkshakes at Harper's Diner, and dreamed of a future where they'd marry under the Ohio stars. But Ethan's heart belonged to Lily Harper, a sharp-tongued girl with auburn curls and a smile that masked a calculating heart. Emily had ignored the sign's stolen glances and whispered promises, blinding herself with love. She married Ethan believing her devotion would win him over. It didn't. Ethan's loyalty to Lily never wavered. He stood by as Lily humiliated Emily at town gatherings, her barbed words turning neighbors' smiles into pitying glances. The worst came at a church picnic, when Lily, in a jealous rage, pushed Emily during an argument, causing her to fall onto the rocky ground. The pain was excruciating, and Emily miscarried the child she and Ethan had hoped for. In the hospital, shattered and bleeding, she waited for her husband's comfort. Instead, Ethan recoiled at the sight of her, muttering, "This is too much, Emily. I can't deal with this." He left to console Lily, who wept crocodile tears over the incident. Emily spiraled into despair, her spirit broken. Years later, the final betrayal came when she discovered their adopted daughter, Madison, was Ethan and Lily's biological child, a secret they'd kept for decades. On the day Emily handed her company to Madison, Lily knelt mockingly before her, sneering, "You lost everything, Emily. I gave you my daughter to make up for it. Now give me back my lover." Rage and heartbreak consumed Emily, and she collapsed, her life ending as Ethan and Madison watched coldly. Now reborn at 20, Emily sat on her old quilted bedspread, the locket pulsing faintly in her hand. The room was exactly as she remembered: faded floral wallpaper, a chipped vanity mirror, and a stack of romance novels dog-eared from countless readings. Outside, the morning sun filtered through maple trees, casting dappled light on the hardwood floor. She was back at the moment before everything went wrong, the day Mrs. Margaret Thompson would ask her to choose a fiancé from her sons Ethan and Daniel. Emily had chosen Ethan without hesitation, sealing her fate in her past life. This time, she would choose differently. She would select Daniel, the older brother, whose quiet kindness had been a constant, unnoticed presence in her past life. Daniel stood by her through every tear and every argument, never asking for anything in return. Her resolve hardened like steel. She wouldn't waste this second chance. Rising from the bed, Emily splashed cold water on her face from the porcelain basin on her dresser. Her reflection showed the same wide hazel eyes and chestnut hair, but there was a new fire in her gaze, forged from 30 years of regret. She slipped into a simple blue dress, modest yet flattering, perfect for Maplewood's small-town charm, and pinned the locket beneath her collar. It was her anchor, a reminder of the magic or miracle that had brought her here. Stepping outside, she felt the gravel crunch under her sneakers, the town alive with the rhythm of summer. Neighbors waved from porches, kids rode bikes down Main Street, and the church bell chimed in the distance, signaling Sunday service. Emily's heart swelled with hope, tempered by a flicker of fear. Could she truly change her fate? Could she outrun the ghosts of her past? Before heading to the Thompsons' house, Emily paused at the town square where a local radio station had set up a booth for a community broadcast. A young DJ's voice, crackling through a microphone, called out, "Hey Maplewood, love stories of redemption and second chances. Tune in tonight for a tale that'll tug at your heartstrings. And if you're catching this on our new YouTube channel, smash that like button, comment about your fresh starts, and subscribe to keep up with Maplewood's stories." Emily smiled faintly, the modern twist of YouTube odd in 1985, but fitting for her journey of rebirth. She imagined her story inspiring others to seize their chances and rewrite their endings. With a deep breath, she walked on, ready to face the Thompsons and alter her destiny. The Thompson house stood at the edge of town, a white clapboard home with a wraparound porch and rose bushes in full bloom. Mrs. Margaret Thompson, a sturdy woman with graying curls and a warm smile, waited at the door. "Emily, sweetheart, you're right on time," she said, pulling her into a hug that smelled of lavender and fresh-baked bread. The living room was warm and inviting, with a plaid sofa, a wood-burning fireplace, and family photos lining the mantel. Ethan lounged in an armchair, his boots propped on an ottoman, exuding confidence. Daniel stood by the window, his broad shoulders tense, his brown eyes flickering with quiet intensity. Emily's heart skipped as she met his gaze, seeing something she'd missed in her past life, a depth, a kindness, a spark of hope. Ethan, oblivious, grinned at her. "Ready to make it official, Em," he teased, assuming her choice was a foregone conclusion. Emily's fingers brushed the locket, its warmth steadying her. This was her moment to break free, to choose a new path. The Thompson living room felt like a theater, the air charged with anticipation as Emily Carter stood before Mrs. Margaret Thompson and her two sons. The grandfather clock ticked loudly each second, a reminder of the choice that would define her future. In her past life, this moment had been a mere formality. Everyone in Maplewood knew Emily was smitten with Ethan Thompson. She'd chosen him without a second thought, her heart blind to his flaws and to the quiet strength of his older brother Daniel. That choice had led to decades of betrayal and pain. Now reborn with the wisdom of her past mistakes, Emily felt the weight of this moment like a stone in her chest. The locket beneath her dress pulsed faintly, urging her to seize this second chance and rewrite her story. Mrs. Margaret Thompson sat on the plaid sofa, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes warm but searching. "Emily, you know how much you mean to us," she began, her voice steady like the glow of a hearth on a winter night. "When your parents passed, God rest their souls, they entrusted you to our family. We've raised you like our own, and now that you're 20, it's time to think about your future. My boys, Ethan and Daniel, are both fine young men. Which one will you choose as your fiancé?" Her words hung in the air, heavy with expectation. In her past life, Emily had blurted Ethan's name, her cheeks flushed with naive love. Now she paused, her gaze drifting between the brothers, her mind racing with memories of what had been and could be. Ethan, sprawled in his armchair, flashed a cocky grin. His blonde hair caught the sunlight streaming through the window, and his blue eyes sparkled with the confidence of Maplewood's golden boy. At 22, he was the town's heartthrob star of the local baseball team, charming and always the center of attention. But Emily saw past the charm, now saw the selfishness that had destroyed her in her past life. She remembered the countless nights she'd cried alone, waiting for Ethan to choose her over Lily Harper, only to be met with cold indifference. Daniel, standing by the window, was a stark contrast. At 25, he was broader, quieter, with a face weathered by responsibility. His brown eyes deep and steady, like the Ohio earth held a warmth she'd overlooked before. He shifted uncomfortably, unsure why he was even part of this conversation, his hands stuffed in the pockets of his worn jeans. Emily's thoughts swirled. Daniel had been a shadow in her past life, always there when Ethan let her down. When Ethan ignored her tears after a fight, Daniel would appear with a coffee from Harper's diner, claiming he was passing by. When Lily's rumors turned the town against her, Daniel quietly defended her, never seeking recognition. Even after Emily married Ethan, Daniel stayed single, turning down every matchmaking attempt in Maplewood and earning whispers as the strange man who wouldn't marry. Ethan had too consumed her to see it then, but now she understood Daniel had loved her silently, steadfastly all along. His kindness had been a lifeline she'd ignored, and now it was her chance to choose differently. "I choose Daniel, Emily," said her voice, clear and firm, cutting through the room like a bell. The words felt like a promise to herself and her new life. Mrs. Thompson's eyes widened, her mouth parting in surprise. Ethan's grin vanished, replaced by a scowl. What he snapped, sitting up straight, his boots hitting the floor with a thud. "You're kidding, right, Em? You've been glued to me since we were kids." His tone was sharp, laced with disbelief and wounded pride. Daniel froze his head, snapping toward Emily, his expression a mix of shock and a flicker of hope, his brown eyes searching hers for confirmation. Before Emily could respond, the front door swung open with a bang, and Lily Harper stormed in, her auburn curls bouncing with her agitation. At 19, Lily was striking with sharp cheekbones and green eyes that glinted with defiance. The daughter of Maplewood's grocer, she'd grown up on the fringes of the town's social circles, always clawing for a place in the spotlight. "This is ridiculous," she spat, glaring at Emily. "Everyone in Maplewood knows you're Ethan's shadow, Emily. Stop playing games and pick him already." Her voice dripped with venom, but beneath it, Emily sensed desperation, a fear of losing Ethan, who she saw as her ticket to status and security. Lily's family struggled to keep their store afloat, and Ethan's charm was her way out. Emily's choice threatened everything she'd schemed for. Mrs. Thompson rose, her face stern. "Lily Harper, you weren't invited here," she said, her tone sharp enough to make Lily flinch. "And Ethan, you should know better than to let this girl barge into family matters." She turned to Emily, her expression softening. "Are you sure, sweetheart? This is a big decision." Emily nodded, her resolve unshaken. "I'm sure, Mrs. Thompson. Daniel is my choice." She met Daniel's gaze, and for the first time he smiled, a slight hesitant curve of his lips that warmed her heart like sunlight breaking through clouds. Ethan laughed, but it was brittle, forced. "You're making a mistake, Em. Daniel's boring, always tinkering at that garage covered in grease. You'll regret this." He stood, brushing past his mother, and grabbed Lily's arm. "Come on, Lily, let's get out of here. She'll come crawling back when she realizes what she's missing." Lily shot Emily a venomous look before following Ethan out the screen door, slamming behind them. Mrs. Thompson sighed, rubbing her temples. "I'm sorry, Emily. Ethan's always been impulsive. But Daniel," she glanced at her older son, pride in her eyes. "He's a good man. You've chosen well." Alone with Daniel, Emily felt a nervous flutter in her chest. He stepped closer, his hands still in his pockets, his voice low. "Emily, I didn't expect this," he said, his eyes searching hers. "I've always cared for you, but never thought you'd choose me. If this is real, I promise I'll do right by you." His sincerity was a balm to her wounded heart, starkly contrasting Ethan's empty promises. Emily smiled, her fears easing. "I know you will, Daniel," she said softly. The locket pulsed once more, as if sealing her choice, and for the first time Emily felt she was exactly where she was meant to be. The summer sun dipped low over Maplewood, Ohio, painting the Thompson family's front yard in hues of gold and amber. Emily Carter stood on the wraparound porch, her heart still thrumming from the bold declaration she'd made moments ago. She had chosen Daniel Thompson, not Ethan, as her fiancé. The scent of blooming roses mingled with the fresh-cut grass, but the tranquility was shattered by the echo of Ethan's parting words. "You'll come crawling back when you realize what you're missing." His arrogance cut like a blade, a sharp reminder of the pain he'd inflicted in her past life. Emily's fingers brushed the silver locket beneath her blue dress, its faint warmth anchoring her resolve. She had been reborn to rewrite her story, and she would not falter, no matter how fiercely Ethan or his lover, Lily Harper, fought to pull her back into their chaos. Mrs. Margaret Thompson was still reeling from Emily's choice inside the Thompson house. Her graying curls bounced as she paced the living room, muttering about Ethan's impulsiveness. "That boy's got no sense sometimes," she said, her voice a mix of exasperation and affection. "But you, Emily, you've chosen well. Daniel's steady, dependable, everything Ethan isn't." She glanced at her older son, who stood by the window, his broad shoulders tense, his brown eyes fixed on the horizon. Daniel hadn't spoken since Emily's declaration, but his silence spoke volumes, a mix of shock, hope, and something deeper, something Emily hadn't noticed in her past life. She wanted to reach out to assure him, but the moment's weight held her still. Outside, the crunch of gravel signaled trouble. Ethan stormed back onto the porch, his blonde hair disheveled, his blue eyes blazing with indignation. Behind him trailed Lily Harper, her auburn curls bouncing with each furious step, her green eyes narrowed to slits. "You think you can toss me aside like that? Em." Ethan snapped, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of a neighbor watering her garden across the street. "You've been following me since we were kids, begging for my attention, and now you pick Daniel. What's this, some game?" His words dripped with wounded pride, as if Emily's choice was a personal affront to his status as Maplewood's golden boy. Lily stepped forward, her arms crossed, her lips curled in a sneer. "She's just trying to make you jealous, Ethan," she said, her voice sharp and cutting. "Everyone in Maplewood knows she's your shadow. This is pathetic, Emily. You can't have him, so you settle for his brother Lo, even for you." Her words were venomous, but Emily caught a flicker of fear in Lily's eyes, a desperation beyond jealousy. Lily's family ran Harper's Diner, a struggling business on the edge of town, and Ethan was her ticket to a better life, a way to escape the whispers of a poor grocer's daughter that followed her. Emily's choice threatened to unravel Lily's carefully laid plans, and she was fighting to keep her grip on Ethan, Mrs. Thompson appeared at the door, her face stern. "That's enough, both of you," she barked, her voice cutting through the tension like a whip. "Lily, you have no business here barging into a family matter, and Ethan, you're acting like a spoiled child. Emily's made her choice, and you'll respect it." She turned to Emily, her expression softening. "Don't mind them, sweetheart. You've got a good head on your shoulders." But Ethan wasn't done. He stepped closer, his boots scuffing the porch boards. "You're making a mistake, Em," he said, his voice lower now, almost pleading. "Daniel's boring. He's always at that garage fixing cars covered in grease. You'll be miserable with him. You know you belong with me." Emily's heart clenched, not with longing, but with the weight of her past life's memories. She remembered Ethan's charm and how it had blinded her to his flaws. In her past life, she'd chased after him, begging for his love, only to be met with cold indifference while he ran to Lily. She'd ignored Daniel's quiet presence and steady support because Ethan's flash consumed her. Standing on this porch, she saw Ethan for what he was, a man who loved the idea of being loved, not the woman who loved him. "You're wrong, Ethan," she said, her voice steady, her hazel eyes unflinching. "I don't belong with you. I never did. I choose Daniel because he's kind and sees me, not because I'm trying to prove anything to you." Ethan's face reddened, his jaw tightening. "Fine," he spat. "Play house with Daniel. But don't come crying to me when you realize what you've lost." He grabbed Lily's arm, pulling her toward the street. "Let's go, Lily. She's not worth it." Lily shot Emily a venomous glare, her lips trembling with suppressed rage. "You'll regret this, Emily," she hissed. "You think you're better than me, but nothing without Ethan." As they stormed off, the neighbor across the street shook her head, muttering about young folks and their drama. Emily exhaled, her shoulders relaxing. She'd faced them down, and for the first time she felt unburdened by their expectations. Mrs. Thompson placed a hand on Emily's shoulder, her touch warm and reassuring. "You did well, sweetheart," she said softly. "Ethan's always been a firecracker, but he'll come around. And Lily, well, she's got her own troubles." She glanced at Daniel, who had stepped onto the porch, his expression unreadable. "Daniel, why don't you walk Emily home? It's getting late." Daniel nodded, his brown eyes meeting Emily's with a quiet intensity that quickened her pulse. As they stepped off the porch, the summer evening wrapping around them like a soft blanket, Emily felt a spark of hope. She had taken the first step toward a new life where she could be loved for who she was, not who she chased. Walking down Main Street, the streetlights flickering on Emily, stole glances at Daniel. He was taller than Ethan, and his frame was broad from years of working at his father's auto shop. His hands calloused from wrenches, and oil swung gently at his sides. "Emily," he said finally, his voice low, almost hesitant. "I meant what I said back there. I've always cared for you, but never thought you'd pick me. I'm not like Ethan. I don't have his charm, his way with people. But I promise I'll be good to you if you let me." His words were simple, but they carried a weight that made Emily's heart ache. In her past life, she'd overlooked Daniel's quiet strength, his unwavering loyalty. Now she saw it clearly, and it felt like coming home. "I know you will, Daniel," she said, smiling up at him. "And I'm not looking for charm. I'm looking for someone who sees me, who stays." Daniel's lips curved into a small, genuine smile, and for a moment they walked in companionable silence, the crickets chirping around them. The locket at Emily's neck pulsed once, affirming her choice. She was no longer the girl who chased a dream that broke her. She was reborn as Emily Carter, and was ready to build a future on her own terms. The days following Emily's decision passed in a blur of summer heat and quiet moments that felt like the first breaths of a new life. Maplewood, Ohio buzzed with its usual rhythm, kids on bikes, the clatter of dishes at Harper's Diner, the hum of lawnmowers. But for Emily Carter, everything was different. Her choice to marry Daniel Thompson, not Ethan, had whispered the town abuzz. Neighbors gossiped over picket fences, speculating whether Emily had finally seen through Ethan's charm, or if she was trying to stir up drama. Emily ignored the chatter, her heart buoyed by the locket's faint warmth and the growing certainty that she'd made the right choice. But as she walked through town, her thoughts drifted to Daniel, to the man she'd overlooked in her past life, and to the future they might build together. Daniel's auto shop, Thompson's garage, sat on the edge of Maplewood, a modest brick building with a faded sign and a gravel lot cluttered with old cars. Emily decided to visit him there, curious to see where he spent his days. The shop smelled of oil and metal, and the clank of tools echoed as Daniel bent over the hood of a beat-up Chevy, his flannel shirt rolled up to his elbows. He looked up as she approached, his brown eyes lighting with surprise and a hint of nervousness. "Emily," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Didn't expect you here. Everything okay?" His voice was warm, but there was a cautious edge, as if he still couldn't believe she'd chosen him. "Everything's fine," Emily said, smiling. "I just wanted to see where you work. Mrs. Thompson says you're here more than you're home." Daniel chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that made her heart skip. "Pop left me the shop when he passed, and it's been my life ever since. Keeps me busy." He gestured to a stool by the workbench. "Want to sit? I can get you a soda from the cooler." Emily nodded, settling onto the stool as Daniel grabbed 2 bottles of Coca-Cola, the glass cold against her palm. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the radio hum playing Johnny Cash in the background. As Emily sipped her soda, she studied Daniel. She'd barely noticed him in her past life, too consumed by Ethan's flash to see the quiet strength in Daniel's steady hands, his thoughtful gaze. She remembered moments now, moments she'd dismissed, then Daniel bringing her coffee after Ethan's fights, standing up for her when Lily's rumors spread, staying single long after she'd married Ethan. "Daniel," she said softly, "why didn't you ever say anything? All those years you were there for me, but you never told me how you felt." Daniel's hands stilled on the rag, his shoulders tensing. He looked down, his jaw working as if searching for the right words. "I didn't think you'd see me," he said, his voice low. "You were always with Ethan, looking at him like he hung the moon. I figured you deserved someone who could give you that kind of spark. I'm just me, grease under my nails, working late, not much for words." He met her eyes, and the vulnerability there made her breath catch. "But I cared for you, Emily. Always did. When you were hurting, I wanted to fix it, but I didn't know how. So I stayed close, hoping you'd be okay." Emily's throat tightened. In her past life, she'd been blind to Daniel's quiet love, to the way he'd watched over her without ever asking for anything in return. Sitting in his shop, she saw him clearly, a man who loved deeply, not with grand gestures, but with steadfast presence. She said, "You did more than you know," her voice thick with emotion. "Every time Ethan let me down, you were there. I was too foolish to see it then, but I see it now. I chose you because I know you're the kind of man who stays, Daniel, who builds something real." Daniel's face softened, a flush creeping up his neck. "You mean that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily nodded, reaching out to touch his hand. His skin was warm, rough from work, and the contact sparked her. "I mean it," she said. "I want a life with you, not just because of what happened before, but because of who you are." Daniel's lips curved into a smile, shy but genuine, and for a moment the world shrank to just the two of them, the clatter of the shop fading away. Their moment was interrupted by the roar of a motorcycle pulling into the lot. Ethan dismounted, his blonde hair mussed, his blue eyes stormy. Lily followed, her auburn curls tied back, her expression a mix of defiance and unease. "And we need to talk," Ethan said, striding toward them. Daniel stood, his posture protective, but Emily raised a hand, signaling she could handle it. "What is it, Ethan?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You're making a fool of yourself, picking Daniel to get back at me. You think I don't see it? You've always wanted me. This whole thing is a stunt." Lily stepped forward, her green eyes flashing. "He's right, Emily. You're embarrassing yourself, acting like you're above us. Ethan's the catch in this town, not some greasy mechanic." Her words were sharp, but Emily saw the cracks in her bravado. Her hands fidgeted, and her gaze darted to Ethan for approval. Lily wasn't just jealous. She was desperate, clinging to Ethan as her way out of a life of struggle. Emily would have argued, pleaded, and fought for Ethan's attention in her past life. Now she stood her ground, her heart steady. "Ethan, Lily." "I'm not playing games," Emily said, her voice cutting through their accusations. "I chose Daniel because I love him. After all, he's a good man who respects me. You two can think what you want, but my choice is made." She turned to Daniel, who was watching her with quiet pride. Ethan's face reddened, his fists clenching. "You'll regret this, Em," he snapped. "You're throwing away everything we had." He grabbed Lily's arm and stormed back to his motorcycle, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Daniel let out a breath, his shoulders relaxing. "You didn't have to do that, Emily," he said. "I can handle Ethan." Emily smiled, squeezing his hand. "I know you can, but I needed to say it for me, for us." Emily felt a surge of certainty as they stood together in the fading light. Daniel wasn't just a safe choice, he was the right one. The locket pulsed once, as if in agreement, and Emily knew she was building something real, something worth fighting for. The summer of 1985 in Maplewood, Ohio, carried a restless energy, as if the town sensed the shifting currents of Emily Carter's new life. Days after her bold decision to choose Daniel Thompson as her fiancé, Emily walked through the town square, the air thick with the scent of cotton candy and grilled hot dogs from the annual Maplewood Fair. The fair was a tradition, a whirlwind of laughter, carnival games, and twinkling lights that drew every soul in town. Emily's blue dress swayed as she navigated the crowd, her silver locket tucked beneath her collar, its faint pulse a reminder of her second chance. She was no longer the girl who chased Ethan Thompson's fleeting affection. She was building a future with Daniel, a man whose quiet strength anchored her. Yet the whispers of townsfolk, some curious, some judgmental, followed her, a constant reminder that her choice had stirred Maplewood's gossip mill. Emily paused by a booth selling homemade jams, her hazel eyes scanning the crowd. She spotted Daniel near the Ferris wheel, helping a group of kids fix a broken ride ticket stand. His flannel shirt rolled up his broad shoulders, moving with easy confidence. Her heart warmed at the sight, but a shadow fell across her thoughts as Lily Harper emerged from the crowd, her auburn curls catching the evening light. Her green eyes locked on Emily with a predatory glint. Lily's presence was no surprise. Maplewood was small, and Lily, the daughter of the struggling Harper's diner, was a fixture at town events, always seeking attention. But tonight her posture was different, her usual bravado tinged with something raw, almost desperate. "Emily," Lily said, her voice low, sharp enough to cut through the fair's cheerful din. She stepped closer, her arms crossed her red sundress, a bold contrast to the pastel colors around her. "You think you've won, don't you? Choosing Daniel, acting like you're above Ethan. You're nothing without him." Her words were venomous, echoing the taunts she'd thrown at Emily on the Thompson porch days earlier. But her voice had a tremor and a crack in her usual confidence. Emily straightened, her resolve steady. In her past life, Lily's cruelty had broken her, spreading rumors, pushing her to cause a miscarriage, mocking her pain. This time, Emily wouldn't let Lily's words wound her. "I'm not playing games, Lily," Emily said, her voice calm but firm. "I chose Daniel because I love him, not to hurt you or Ethan. You can believe what you want, but I'm done letting you push me around." Her words were a quiet rebellion, a refusal to repeat the mistakes of her past life, where she'd fought and cried over Lily's provocations. Lily's eyes narrowed, her lips parting as if to retort, but she hesitated, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her dress. "You don't get it, do you?" she said, her voice dropping to a hiss. "Ethan was my way out. My family's drowning in debt. Dad's diner's barely hanging on. Ethan's the golden boy who could have changed everything for me. And you just took him away." Emily blinked, caught off guard by the raw honesty in Lily's words. In her past life, she'd seen Lily as a one-dimensional villain, a jealous schemer who thrived on cruelty. Now she saw the cracks in Lily's armor, the fear of a future tied to a failing business, the pressure of being the grocer's daughter in a town that valued wealth and status. Lily's pursuit of Ethan wasn't just about love. It was about survival, a desperate bid to escape the weight of her family's struggles. But understanding didn't erase the pain Lily had caused, the lies she'd told, the life she'd stolen in another timeline. Emily's heart hardened. "I didn't take Ethan from you, Lily," she said. "He made his own choices. And so have I. I'm building a life with Daniel, and I won't let you guilt me into giving that up." Lily's face flushed, her green eyes flashing with anger and hurt. "You're so smug, Emily," she spat. "Acting like you're better than me, like you deserve Daniel's boring little life. But Ethan's mine, and I'll prove it. You'll see." She turned on her heel, her curls bouncing as she disappeared into the crowd, leaving a trail of whispers from onlookers. Emily exhaled, her shoulders relaxing. In her past life, she'd have chased after Lily, argued, pleaded, let herself be dragged into the drama. Now she turned back to the jam booth, picking up a jar of raspberry preserves and handing over $1, her hands steady. She was done fighting Lily's battles. As the fair's lights twinkled against the dusk, Emily rejoined Daniel, who greeted her with a warm smile, his brown eyes crinkling at the corners. "Everything okay?" he asked, brushing a speck of dust from his flannel sleeve. Emily nodded, slipping her arm through his. "Just Lily." Being Lily, she said, her tone light but firm. I'm not letting her get to me anymore. Daniel's smile widened and he squeezed her hand, his calloused fingers reassuring. They wandered through the fair, sharing a cotton candy stick, the sweetness melting on Emily's tongue as she laughed at Daniel's stories of fixing cars and dodging Mrs. Thompson's matchmaking attempts over the years. For the first time, Emily felt free, not just from Ethan and Lily, but from the ghosts of her past life. She was choosing her own path, leading to Daniel, to moments like this, simple and real. Later that evening, as they sat on a bench watching fireworks burst over the fairgrounds, Emily leaned against Daniel's shoulder, the locket pulsing faintly at her neck. She thought of Lily's words in desperation and felt a flicker of pity, but only a flicker. Lily's motives were tangled, rooted in fear and ambition, but they didn't justify the pain she'd caused. Emily's focus was here now, with Daniel's steady presence and the promise of a future she could shape. The fireworks lit up the sky, and Emily knew she was exactly where she was meant to be, her second chance unfolding like the stars above. The morning of Emily Carter and Daniel Thompson's wedding dawned bright and clear, the July sun bathing Maplewood, Ohio in a golden glow. The town buzzed with excitement, the air filled with the scent of fresh-baked pies and the hum of anticipation. Emily stood in her childhood bedroom, her reflection in the chipped vanity mirror showing a woman transformed. Her white lace dress, simple yet elegant, hugged her frame, and her chestnut hair was swept into a soft updo, a few curls framing her face. The silver locket, her mother's heirloom, rested against her collarbone, its faint warmth a quiet blessing for her new beginning. Her wedding to Ethan had been a hollow victory in her past life, marred by his indifference and Lily's shadow. Today, marrying Daniel, Emily felt a surge of joy tempered by the knowledge that Ethan and Lily might try to disrupt her happiness. The ceremony was set at Maplewood's community church, a quaint stone building with stained glass windows that cast rainbows across the pews. Townsfolk filled the seats, their whispers a mix of congratulations and curiosity about Emily's unexpected choice. Mrs. Margaret Thompson bustled about, her graying curls bouncing as she adjusted flowers, and greeted guests, her pride in Emily and Daniel evident in her beaming smile. Daniel waited at the altar, his broad frame handsome in a navy suit, his brown eyes bright with nervous anticipation. Emily's heart swelled as she caught his gaze, a silent promise passing between them. This was the life she'd chosen, the one she'd been reborn to claim. But as Emily stepped out of the church's side door, ready to walk down the aisle, the roar of a motorcycle shattered the morning's calm. Ethan Thompson skidded to a stop in the churchyard, his blonde hair mussed, his blue eyes wild with anger. Lily Harper clung to the back of his bike, her red dress a bold statement against the wedding's soft whites and pastels, her auburn curls tied back but her expression defiant. The crowd outside gasped, their murmurs rising like a tide. Ethan dismounted, striding toward Emily with purpose. This wedding's not happening," he barked, his voice carrying across the yard. "You owe Lily an apology for spreading rumors about her. Everyone's talking, saying she's chasing me, ruining her name. You fix this or I'm calling it off." Lily stepped forward, her green eyes glinting with smugness and unease. "Emily," she said, her voice syrupy sweet but laced with venom, "I'm not even mad anymore. But Ethan's right, you need to set the record straight, otherwise you're delaying your own ceremony." Her red dress, tailored to draw every eye, was a calculated move, a reminder of the past life when she'd worn a similar gown to taunt Emily at her wedding to Ethan. Emily's stomach twisted, not with fear, but with resolve. She remembered the pain of that day, the humiliation, the miscarriage that followed Lily's cruelty. This time she wouldn't let them steal her moment. Before Emily could respond, Daniel appeared at her side, his presence steady, his hand brushing hers in quiet support. Mrs. Thompson followed, her face stern. "Ethan, Lily, you're out of line," she snapped, her voice cutting through the crowd's murmurs. "This is Emily and Daniel's day. You've no right to make a scene." But Ethan ignored his mother, his eyes locked on Emily. "You're mine, Em," he said, his voice cracking with desperation. "You've always loved me. This thing with Daniel, it's a mistake. Apologize to Lily and we can move on. I'll marry you like we always planned." The crowd's whispers grew louder, and Emily caught snippets. Ethan's delusional "look at the banner" as heads turned to the church entrance where a sign read, "Congratulations, Daniel and Emily." Emily took a deep breath, her locket pulsing, and stepped forward. "Ethan," she said, her voice clear, carrying over the crowd. "You're wrong. I don't love you. I love Daniel. I'm marrying him today, and no tantrum of yours will change that." She turned to Daniel, who nodded, his brown eyes fierce with pride. Without another word, Emily climbed onto the back of Daniel's motorcycle parked nearby for their post-ceremony ride. "Let's go, husband!" she roared, wrapping her arms around his waist, her voice ringing with defiance. Daniel's back stiffened, a smile tugging at his lips as he revved the engine. The crowd erupted in cheers, some clapping, others shouting, "Go, Emily!" Ethan stood frozen, his face pale as Lily tugged at her dress, her smugness fading to panic. "Ethan, do something," she hissed, but he only stared as Daniel and Emily sped away, the crowd following in a joyful procession. The churchyard banner fluttered in the breeze, a public declaration of Emily's choice. Townsfolk shouted, "It's Daniel's name, Ethan, not yours, and you've been running around with Lily, and you think you're the groom." The public humiliation sharply reverses Emily's past life where she was shamed. Now she rode away with Daniel, her heart light, her future bright. As they reached the church's main entrance, Daniel parked the bike, helping Emily with a gentle hand. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. Emily nodded, her hazel eyes meeting his. "More than okay," she said. "I'm free." The crowd surrounded them, their blessings washing over her like a warm wave. Emily glanced back, seeing Ethan and Lily trailing behind their faces, a mix of shock and anger. She didn't care. This was her day, her life, her second chance. The locket pulsed once, and Emily stepped into the church, ready to marry the man she loved, leaving the chaos of her past behind. The days following Emily Carter and Daniel Thompson's wedding in Maplewood, Ohio, were a whirlwind of quiet joy and lingering tension. The summer of 1985 draped the town in a golden haze, with fireflies dancing in the evenings and the distant hum of cicadas filling the air. Emily, now Mrs. Daniel Thompson, moved into the Thompson family's clapboard house, her belongings tucked into a cozy room that smelled of cedar and fresh paint. The silver locket, her mother's heirloom, and the mystical key to her rebirth, rested against her heart, its faint warmth a reminder of the second chance she'd seized. Her wedding day had been a triumph, marked by her bold rejection of Ethan Thompson and Lily Harper's disruptive antics, but the echoes of that chaos lingered like ripples on a still pond. Emily stood in the Thompson kitchen kneading dough for a peach pie, the recipe one of Mrs. Margaret Thompson's specialties. The older woman hummed softly, arranging flowers in a vase, her graying curls bouncing with each movement. "You're a natural, Emily," she said, her voice warm with pride. "This house feels alive with you here." Emily smiled, her hazel eyes softening. In her past life, she'd spent countless lonely nights in a kitchen like this, waiting for Ethan to come home, only to be met with his indifference. Now with Daniel, she felt a sense of belonging, a promise of a life built on mutual respect. But the peace was fragile, and Emily sensed it could be shattered by the storm that was Ethan. The screen door creaked, and Ethan stepped into the kitchen, his blonde hair disheveled, his blue eyes shadowed with anger and desperation. Mrs. Thompson's smile faded, her hands pausing on the vase. "Ethan, what's this about?" she asked, her tone sharp. Emily set down the rolling pin, her heart steady but wary. Ethan's presence was a reminder of her past life, where his betrayal had crushed her, his loyalty to Lily, the miscarriage she'd suffered, the cruel truth about their adopted daughter. She'd faced him on her wedding day, but his persistence unnerved her. We need to talk," he said, his voice low, almost pleading. "Alone." Mrs. Thompson stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. She said, "Anything you have to say you can tell in front of me." But Emily shook her head, her resolve firm. "It's okay, Mrs. Thompson," she said. "I can handle this." She wiped her hands on her apron and led Ethan to the porch, where the summer breeze carried the scent of roses. Ethan paced his boots, scuffing the boards, his hands clenched into fists. "You're making a mistake, Em," he said, his voice cracking. "You think Daniel's what you want, but you've always loved me. I messed up running off with Lily that day, but it wasn't what you think." Emily crossed her arms, her locket pulsing faintly. "What is it then, Ethan?" she asked, her voice calm but unyielding. Ethan stopped pacing, his eyes locking onto hers, filled with a desperate intensity. "I thought Lily saved me," he said, "back when we were teens during that fire in the hills. I was trapped, choking on smoke, and I thought she pulled me out. That's why I've been good to her and felt I owed her. But I was wrong, Em. I see it now. I should have chosen you from the start." Emily's heart clenched, not with longing, but with a sudden, sharp memory. In her past life, she'd been the one who ran into the burning hills to save Ethan, her lungs burning, her arms aching as she dragged him to safety. He'd never known, never thanked her, instead crediting Lily with the act. The revelation had come too late after years of pain. Ethan's words stirred a flicker of pity, but not enough to sway her. "You're wrong, Ethan," she said, her voice steady. "You didn't choose me then and don't get to pick me now. I love Daniel. I married him because he's the man I want, not because I'm settling or playing games." Ethan's face crumpled, his blue eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But we had something, Em," he said, stepping closer. "All those years you followed, laughed, and loved me. You can't just throw that away. I was confused, yeah, but I'm here now. I'll make it right." His voice broke, and for a moment Emily saw the boy she'd once loved, the boy who'd shared her dreams under the stars, before Lily's shadow darkened their path. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who'd betrayed her, who'd let Lily humiliate her, who'd built a life on lies. Before Emily could respond, Daniel appeared at the door, his broad frame filling the space, his brown eyes narrowing as he took in Ethan's proximity to Emily. "That's enough, Ethan," he said, his voice low but firm, laced with a protective edge. "Emily's my wife now. You need to respect that." Ethan's jaw tightened, his gaze darting between them. "You don't get it, Daniel," he snapped. "She's only with you to get back at me. She doesn't love you." Daniel's hands clenched, but Emily stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. "He's wrong, Daniel," she said, her voice clear, her eyes locked on his. "I love you. I chose you because you're the man I want to build a life with." Daniel's tension eased, his lips curving into a small, grateful smile. Ethan's face reddened, his fists trembling. "You'll regret this, Em," he said, his voice hoarse. "You're throwing away everything we could have had." He turned and stormed off, the gravel crunching under his boots as he disappeared into the dusk. Mrs. Thompson joined them on the porch, her expression a mix of worry and resolve. "That boy's got to learn," she muttered. "You did right, Emily. Don't let him shake you." Emily nodded, her heart steady. Ethan's plea had stirred memories of her past life's pain, but it also strengthened her resolve. She wasn't the girl who'd begged for his love anymore. She was Daniel's wife, a woman reborn, and she would protect the life she was building. The locket pulsed as if affirming her strength, and Emily returned to the kitchen, her hands finding the dough again, her heart anchored by Daniel's quiet presence at her side. The weeks after the wedding brought a quiet rhythm to Emily Carter's life in Maplewood, Ohio, as summer deepened into August 1985. The Thompson house became her home, its creaking floors and rose-scented air, a haven of new beginnings. Emily woke each morning to the sound of birds outside her window, and the silver locket at her neck was a constant reminder of her second chance. She was no longer defined by her past life's pain, Ethan's betrayal, Lily's cruelty, the loss of her child, but by the life she was building with Daniel Thompson, a man whose love was as steady as the Ohio earth. Yet Emily knew that proper redemption meant more than finding love. It meant rediscovering herself, forging a path beyond the shadows of her past. Emily enrolled in night classes at Maplewood Community College, a modest brick building on the edge of town. She chose literature, a passion she'd abandoned, to chase Ethan's fleeting affection in her past life. With its worn desks and chalk-dusted air, the classroom felt like a sanctuary. Her professor, Dr. Ellis, a wiry woman, encouraged her to write poetry, praising her vivid imagery and raw emotion. Emily's first poem is about a woman rising from ashes, earning a nod of approval and quietness. "You've got something special, Emily." The words lit a spark in her, a sense of purpose she hadn't known before. Between classes, she befriended Sarah Miller, a spirited classmate with a quick laugh and a love for Emily Dickinson. Over coffee at Harper's Diner, ironic given Lily's family owned it, they talked about books, dreams, and the lives they wanted to lead. Sarah's friendship was a gift, a reminder that Emily's world could expand beyond the Thompsons, beyond the pain of her past. Emily and Daniel grew closer at home, their bond deepening through small everyday moments. One evening they sat on the porch sharing a plate of Mrs. Thompson's cornbread, the stars bright above Maplewood. Daniel told stories of his childhood, how he'd learned to fix cars from his father, how he'd always felt overshadowed by Ethan's charm. He admitted, "I never thought I'd be enough for someone like you," his brown eyes soft in the moonlight. "You're strong, Emily, stronger than you know." Emily squeezed his hand, her heart full. "You're more than enough, Daniel," she said. "You're home." His shy but warm smile was a promise of the life they were building together. But the shadow of Ethan and Lily lingered. One afternoon, as Emily walked home from the college, her arms full of books, Lily appeared on the sidewalk, her auburn curls tied back, her green eyes sharp with resentment. "You're everywhere, aren't you?" Lily said, her voice low, her red lipstick stark against her pale face. "Married to Daniel, taking classes, acting like you figured it all out. But you're still the same Emily, clinging to the Thompsons to feel important." Her words were meant to wound, but Emily saw the strain in Lily's posture, the way her hands twisted together. Lily's family was struggling. Harper's Diner was losing customers to a new chain restaurant in town, and her father's debts were mounting. Lily's pursuit of Ethan wasn't just about love, but about escaping a life that felt like a trap. "I'm not clinging to anyone, Lily," Emily said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm living my life, the one I chose. You should do the same." Lily's eyes flashed, but Daniel's truck pulled up before she could retort, his broad frame leaning out the window. "Need a ride, Emily?" He called, his tone casual, but his eyes fixed on Lily. Emily nodded, climbing in, leaving Lily alone on the sidewalk, her expression a mix of anger and defeat. As they drove away, Daniel glanced at her. "She's trouble, but you handled her," he said, pride in his voice. Emily smiled, her locket pulsing faintly. "I'm learning," she said. Their peace was short-lived. That evening, as Emily and Daniel sat with Mrs. Thompson in the living room, the screen door banged open and Ethan stormed in, his face pale, his blue eyes wild. "Em, we need to talk," he said, ignoring his mother's frown and Daniel's tense posture. "I messed up, okay? I thought Lily saved me in that fire, but I'm starting to wonder." "I need you to tell me the truth. Was it you?" Emily's heart froze. In her past life, she'd carried Ethan out of a burning hillside, her lungs burning, her body aching, but he'd credited Lily, never questioning her lie. His doubt was a crack in his delusion, but it came too late. "It was me," Ethan, Emily said, her voice steady, her hazel eyes unflinching. "I saved you, but it doesn't matter anymore. I'm with Daniel now, and I'm happy." Ethan's face crumpled, his hands trembling. "I didn't know," he whispered. I thought I owed her. Em, please give me another chance." Daniel stood, his voice low but firm. "She's my wife, Ethan. You had your chance and you blew it." Mrs. Thompson nodded, her expression stern. "Enough, Ethan. Leave them be." Ethan's shoulders slumped, and he left without another word, the door slamming behind him. Emily exhaled, her heart heavy but resolute. Ethan's plea had stirred old wounds but clarified her path. She wasn't here to fix him. She was here to live for herself, Daniel, and the life she was building. As she leaned against Daniel, his arm warm around her, she felt the locket pulse, a sign that her new path was valid, leading her toward a future she could finally call her own. August 1985 in Maplewood, Ohio, carried the weight of a town holding its breath. The summer heat lingered, but a cool evening breeze rustled the maple trees, casting dappled shadows across the Thompson family's clapboard house. Emily Carter, now. Emily Thompson stood in the backyard, hanging laundry on the clothesline, her white blouse fluttering like a flag of her new life. The silver locket at her neck, her mother's heirloom, and the mystical key to her rebirth, pulsed faintly, a quiet reminder of the second chance she'd seized. Her marriage to Daniel Thompson was a haven built on quiet moments, shared coffee at dawn, laughter over his stories of fixing cars at the garage. But Ethan Thompson's desperate plea days earlier, his claim that Lily Harper had saved him in a fire, gnawed at Emily's peace. She had pulled him from the flames in her past life, a truth he'd never acknowledged, and his delusion threatened to unravel the fragile stability she'd found. Inside, Mrs. Margaret Thompson was preparing dinner, the aroma of pot roast filling the kitchen. Daniel sat at the table, his broad shoulders hunched over a stack of invoices from the garage, his brown eyes focused but soft whenever they met Emily's through the window. Their bond had deepened, rooted in mutual respect and small acts of love, Daniel fixing her bicycle, Emily leaving notes in his lunchbox. But the shadow of Ethan lingered. He'd been erratic since the wedding, showing up at odd hours, his blue eyes wild with regret. Emily knew he was spiraling, clinging to a false narrative about Lily, and she feared what his desperation might unleash. As Emily pinned a sheet to the line, the crunch of gravel announced an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Thompson stepped onto the porch, her graying curls catching the fading light, her face pale. "Emily, come inside," she called, her voice tight. "We need to talk." Emily's heart sank, her fingers brushing the locket as she followed. Mrs. Thompson stood by the stove in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she stirred a pot. "I overheard Ethan talking to a friend at the diner," she said, her voice low. "He's still going on about Lily saving him in that fire when you were teens." "It's nonsense, Emily. You were the one who carried him out of those hills. Everyone in Maplewood knows it. Emily froze the memory, crashing over her like a wave. It was 1978, a dry summer, when a brush fire swept through the hills outside town. Ethan, 16 and reckless, had been camping with friends, ignoring warnings about open flames. The fire had trapped him, smoke choking the air, and Emily, just 15, had run into the blaze, her lungs burning, her arms aching as she dragged him to safety. She'd collapsed afterward, coughing, her clothes singed, but Ethan had never thanked her. Instead, Lily had claimed the credit, spinning a tale that cemented her hold over him. Emily had let the lie stand in her past life, too heartbroken to fight. The truth felt like a weapon she wasn't sure she wanted to wield. "Why didn't you tell him?" Emily asked, her voice steady, but her hazel eyes searching Mrs. Thompson's face. The older woman sighed, setting down her spoon. "I thought he'd figure it out. You were in the hospital for smoke inhalation. Emily and Lily was prancing around town telling everyone she was the hero. I should have set him straight, but I didn't want to drive a wedge between you two. I thought you'd marry him anyway." Her voice cracked, guilt etching her features. "I was wrong. You deserved better, and I'm glad you chose Daniel." Daniel looked up from his invoices, his jaw tightening. "Ethan's been blind, Ma," he said, his voice low but firm. "He's let Lily twist him up for years. Emily shouldn't have to fix his mistakes." Emily reached for his hand, her heart swelling at his protectiveness. "I don't want to fix him," she said, "but he needs to know the truth. Not for me, but for him to let go." Mrs. Thompson nodded, her eyes resolute. "I'll call him over. It's time he heard it." An hour later, Ethan arrived, his blonde hair mussed, his blue eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He stood in the kitchen, hands shoved in his pockets, his gaze darting between Emily and his mother. "What's this about?" he asked, his tone defensive. Mrs. Thompson stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Ethan, you've been telling folks Lily saved you in that fire. That's a lie. Emily was the one who risked her life and carried you out when you were choking on smoke. You owe her the truth, and you owe yourself to stop living a lie." Ethan's face paled, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "That's not," Lily said. He stammered, turning to Emily, his eyes pleading. "Em, is it true?" Emily nodded, her voice calm but unyielding. "It was me, Ethan. I pulled you out. Lily lied and you believed her. But it doesn't matter anymore. I'm with Daniel now and I'm happy." Ethan's shoulders slumped, his hands trembling. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I thought I owed her. All this time I thought—" His voice broke and he sank into a chair, his face buried in his hands. Lily burst through the screen door, her auburn curls loose, her green eyes wide with panic. "Ethan, please don't listen to them," she cried, her voice shrill. "I saved you. You know I did." But Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes blazing. "Did you?" he demanded, standing to face her. "Or did you lie to me, Lily? I've been paying a debt that wasn't yours to claim all these years." Lily's face crumpled, tears streaking her cheeks. I love you, Ethan," she stammered. "I said it because I wanted you to need me." "Is that so wrong?" Ethan shook his head, his voice cold. "You let me hurt her. You let me believe a lie." He turned to Emily, his eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry, Em. I was a fool." Emily's heart ached, but not for love, lost only for the boy Ethan had once been before Lily's lies and his own weaknesses twisted him. "It's done, Ethan," she said softly. "You need to find your own way now." As Lily fled, sobbing, Ethan stood frozen, the weight of the truth crushing him. Daniel squeezed Emily's hand, his presence a steady anchor. The locket pulsed, and Emily knew this moment had freed her from the last chains of her past life, even as it set Ethan on a path she couldn't predict. The revelation of Lily Harper's lie sent ripples through Maplewood, Ohio, as August 1985 faded into the cooler days of early September. Emily Thompson walked through the town square, her arms full of books from her literature class at Maplewood Community College. The air carried the crisp scent of fallen leaves, and the town was settling into its autumn rhythm. Pumpkins appeared on porches, and the diner was advertising apple pie specials. Emily's life with Daniel Thompson was a quiet joy, filled with shared evenings on the porch and her growing confidence in her poetry. The silver locket at her neck, the key to her rebirth, pulsed faintly, a reminder of the path she'd chosen. But Ethan Thompson's unraveling cast a shadow over her happiness, his desperation a storm brewing on the horizon. Ethan had changed since the truth about the fire came to light. He quit his job at the local factory where he'd been a rising star, and stopped showing up at Harper's Diner where he'd once held court with his charm. Townsfolk whispered about his hollow eyes, unshaven face, and how he wandered Main Street like a lost soul. Emily saw him sometimes lingering outside the Thompson house, his blue eyes fixed on her with a mix of regret and obsession. She tried to focus on her new life, her classes, her friendship with Sarah Miller, her love for Daniel, but Ethan's presence was a constant reminder of the pain he'd caused in her past life and the danger he might pose now. One evening, as Emily walked home from college, the streetlights casting long shadows, Ethan stepped out from an alley, his blonde hair unkempt, his jacket wrinkled. Wait," he called, his voice hoarse. Emily stopped, her heart racing, her hand brushing the locket for strength. "Ethan, you need to stop this," she said, her voice firm. "I'm married to Daniel. There's nothing left for us to talk about." Ethan's face twisted, his eyes glistening with tears. "I can't let you go," he said. "I know I messed up believing Lily hurting you. But I love you, Em. I always have. I'll wait for you even if you divorce Daniel. I'll make it right." Emily's stomach churned. Ethan's love had been a lie in her past life, a hollow promise overshadowed by his devotion to Lily. His obsession felt like a twisted echo of that betrayal driven by guilt rather than love. "Ethan, you don't love me," she said, her voice cold. "You love the idea of me, the girl who followed you. But I'm not her anymore. I'm Daniel's wife and I'm pregnant." The words slipped out a truth she'd confirmed at the doctor's that morning, a secret she'd planned to share with Daniel first. Ethan's face crumpled, his hands trembling. "Pregnant," he whispered. "With him." Before Emily could respond, Daniel's truck pulled up, his broad frame leaping out, his brown eyes blazing as he saw Ethan's proximity. "Back off, Ethan," he growled, stepping between them. "She's my wife, and you're scaring her." Ethan's gaze darted between them, his desperation turning to anger. "You stole her from me, Daniel," he spat. "She was mine." Daniel's fists clenched, but Emily placed a hand on his arm. "He's not worth it," she said softly. "Let's go home." Daniel nodded, his jaw tight, and they drove away, leaving Ethan alone in the darkening street. The next day, news spread like wildfire through Maplewood. Ethan had confronted Lily at Harper's diner, their argument escalating into a public spectacle. Witnesses said Ethan had shouted, accusing Lily of ruining his life with her lies. Tearful and defiant, Lily begged him to stay, but Ethan's rage had spiraled. That night, in a moment of madness, he strangled Lily in the diner's back alley, her body found by her father at dawn. The town was shocked. The restaurant was closed and its windows were dark. Ethan was arrested, his face blank as police led him away, his once charming features hollow with despair. Emily sat in the Thompson living room, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, Mrs. Thompson beside her, her face etched with grief. "I failed him." Mrs. Thompson whispered, her graying curls limp. "I should have seen how far he'd fallen." Emily shook her head, her voice gentle. "It's not your fault, Mrs. Thompson. Ethan made his choices." Daniel, sitting across from them, nodded, his brown eyes heavy. "He said he was my brother, but he let his guilt consume him. I wish I could have stopped him." The town mourned Lily, her family's diner, a symbol of their loss, but whispers of her lies tempered the grief. Emily felt a pang of sorrow, not for the Lily who'd tormented her, but for the girl her desperation had trapped. Ethan's trial was swift. His confession left no doubt, and he was sentenced to death. As the date approached, Emily, now visibly pregnant, grappled with the weight of his actions. The locket pulsed, urging her to move forward, but Ethan's tragic descent was a stark reminder of the past she'd escaped and the fragile line between redemption and ruin. The autumn of 1985 settled over Maplewood, Ohio, like a heavy quilt, the air crisp with the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke. Now 6 months pregnant, Emily Thompson stood in the Thompson family's backyard, her hands resting on her swelling belly, the silver locket at her neck pulsing faintly. The heirloom, her mother's gift, and the mystical key to her rebirth, had guided her through a second chance, leading her to a life with Daniel Thompson, a man whose love was as steady as the Ohio earth. But the shadow of Ethan Thompson's tragic descent hung over her, a dark reminder of the past life she'd escaped. His arrest for Lily Harper's murder had shaken Maplewood, and as his execution date loomed, Emily grappled with the weight of his actions and the pain he'd caused her in another lifetime. The Thompson house, once a haven of warmth, was quiet, now the creak of its floors muted by grief. Mrs. Margaret Thompson moved through her days with a heaviness, her graying curls limp, her eyes red from sleepless nights. Daniel, too, carried the burden of his brother's fall, his broad shoulders tense as he worked long hours at the garage trying to outrun his sorrow. Emily found solace in her literature classes at Maplewood Community College, her poetry earning praise from her professor and her friend Sarah Miller. But the town's whispers followed her. Some pitied Ethan, others condemned him, and a few still blamed Emily for his spiral, as if her choice to marry Daniel had pushed him to madness. She ignored the gossip, focusing on the life growing inside her, but Ethan's request to see her before his execution pulled her back into the past she'd fought to leave behind. On a chilly October morning, Emily stood outside the county jail, her breath visible in the crisp air. Daniel had offered to come, but she'd asked him to stay home, needing to face Ethan alone. The locket pulsed, urging her forward, and she stepped into the stark visiting room, her white sweater loose over her pregnant frame. Ethan sat behind a glass partition, his blonde hair shorn, his blue eyes hollow. The charming boy who'd once held Maplewood in his thrall was replaced by a man broken by guilt and regret. He said, his voice hoarse through the speaker. "Thank you for coming. I needed to see you." Emily sat, her hands folded over her belly, her hazel eyes steady. "What do you want, Ethan?" she asked, her voice calm but guarded. In her past life, Ethan's betrayal had crushed her, his devotion to Lily, the miscarriage she'd suffered, the cruel truth about their adopted daughter. Now his crime had taken Lily's life, a tragic echo of the pain he'd caused. Ethan leaned forward, his hands trembling. "I remember it all, he said, tears streaking his face. "Not just this life, but the one before. I saw you crying after you lost our baby, and I didn't comfort you. I believed Lily's lies, let her twist me. I even gave her our daughter, thinking it would fix things. I was wrong, so bad." Emily's heart clenched, the memories of her past life, surging her desperate pleas for Ethan's love. The lonely nights, the betrayal of learning Madison was Lily's child. She'd carried that pain for decades, but now reborn, she felt it fading like a wound finally healing. "You made your choices, Ethan," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You hurt me, yes, but I've moved on. I'm happy with Daniel and the life we're building. Why tell me this now?" Ethan's eyes dropped to her belly, his expression a mix of sorrow and longing. "I killed Lily," he said, his voice breaking. "I was so angry, so lost, knowing she lied about the fire, knowing I'd hurt you for nothing. I thought killing her would protect you, stop her from coming after you again. But it was wrong. I threw my life away, and I'm sorry, Em. I need you to forgive me so I can face what's coming." His words hung heavy, a plea for absolution from a man who'd lost everything. Emily's throat tightened, her hand brushing the locket. In her past life, she'd screamed for justice, for Ethan to feel her pain. Now she saw a broken man, not the monster she'd once hated. But forgiveness was not hers to give, not when his actions had taken a life, not when her own heart was finally free. "Ethan," she said, her voice steady, "I don't hate you. But I can't forgive you, not for what you did to me or to Lily. You chose your path, and I've chosen mine. I'm living for my family now, for my child." She stood, her hand on her belly, the locket pulsing as if sealing her words. Ethan's face crumpled, tears falling freely. "I understand," he whispered. I loved you, Em, in my own messed up way. Tell Daniel I'm sorry too." Emily nodded, her heart heavy but resolute. As the guards led Ethan away, his footsteps echoing in the sterile hall, she felt the weight of her past life lift. The locket pulsed once more, and Emily walked out into the autumn light, ready to let go of the pain that had once defined her. Winter 1985 arrived in Maplewood, Ohio, with a gentle blanket of snow, transforming the town into a quiet wonderland. Emily Thompson sat in the nursery of the Thompson house, a cozy room painted soft yellow, rocking in a chair Daniel had built with his own hands. Her daughter Grace, born just before Christmas, slept in her arms, her tiny chest rising and falling, her face perfectly blending Emily's hazel eyes and Daniel's warm smile. The silver locket, now tucked into a drawer, no longer pulsed, its work was done, having guided Emily through her second chance at a life of love and purpose. The pain of her past life, Ethan's betrayal, Lily's cruelty, the loss of her child had faded like smoke, replaced by the warmth of her new family and the community that embraced them. Maplewood had begun to heal from the tragedy of Ethan and Lily. Harper's Diner reopened under new management, a sign of the town's resilience, though Lily's family had moved away, seeking a fresh start. Mrs. Margaret Thompson, still grieving her son, found solace in Grace, her laughter filling the house as she played with her granddaughter. Daniel, too, had found peace, his grief for Ethan tempered by his joy in fatherhood. He spent evenings in the nursery telling Grace stories of Maplewood's hills, his brown eyes bright with love. Emily's heart swelled at the sight, knowing she'd chosen a man who would never let her down. Emily's poetry had blossomed, her work published in the local journal Maplewood Voices, earning praise from her professor and Sarah Miller, her friend from college. At a town reading, she stood before a small crowd, her voice steady as she read a poem about a woman rising from ashes, her words echoing her journey. The applause was warm, and neighbors like old Mr. Jenkins and young Sarah cheered her on. "You've got a gift, Emily," Sarah said later over hot cocoa at the diner. "You're not just surviving, you're shining." Emily smiled, her heart full. Her classes, her writing, her friendship with Sarah were pieces of a life she'd built for herself, beyond the love she shared with Daniel. The town had rallied around the Thompsons after Ethan's execution. A community celebration for Grace's birth, hosted by Mrs. Thompson, filled the church hall with laughter and music. Neighbors brought casseroles and quilts, their blessings a testament to Maplewood's tight-knit spirit. Mrs. Thompson, her graying curls pinned up, raised a glass of cider, her voice thick with emotion. She said to Grace, Emily, and Daniel, and to new beginnings, her eyes shining. The crowd cheered, and Emily felt a surge of gratitude for the town that had witnessed her pain and now shared her joy. One snowy evening, as Emily and Daniel sat by the fireplace, Grace asleep in her crib, Emily reflected on her journey. She'd been a shadow in her past life, defined by Ethan's betrayal and Lily's cruelty. Now she was a wife, a mother, a poet, a woman who had seized her second chance. "Daniel," she said, her voice soft, "I never thought I could be this happy. Thank you for being my home." Daniel's hand found hers, his calloused fingers warm. "You're my home too, Emily," he said, his brown eyes steady. "You and Grace, you're everything." Now resting in its drawer, the locket had fulfilled its purpose, guiding Emily to this moment. The pain of her past life, Ethan's lies, Lily's death, the loss of her first child had faded, replaced by the light of Grace's smile, Daniel's love, and Maplewood's embrace. Emily looked out the window, the snow falling softly, and knew she was living the life she'd been reborn to claim. Her story wasn't just about redemption, it was about creation, about building a future from the ashes of her past. As she held Daniel's hand, Grace's gentle breath filled the room. Emily felt complete, and her heart was finally at peace.